Oh, we're live.
Hey, look at that.
Hey.
Beats the alternative, kids. Beats the alternative.
No doubt.
Chris Buchignani filling in for the dear Goon today. I will be playing the role of Ironhead for today's show. It is the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show. And we are once again at Quaker Steak and Lube, which explains the mouthful of food as we open the program for yours truly with the delightful grilled steak salad, the choice for today's show to keep the energy up.
That's a good helpful
as much
choice
as we can.
too, Ironhead. Good job.
I'm pleased with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm heading to a week of very poor dietary choices.
I'm going to be playing the role of Ironhead next week.
Yes. God bless you for that. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, my friend.
I do think there may be one random day somewhere in there the rest of the summer. I should be here the rest of the summer here, though. The dear Goon, we will see.
It's a moving target.
He is a man on the move, and one of the many reasons we love him. A very big target. I pass along the meme. Apparently, it's been going around everywhere. Brenton down here at Quaker Steak and Lube was showing it to me. I'm like, yeah, I just sent it earlier today to Goon and Booch on the best rivalry in baseball, first base versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. It really is. I mean, it's laughable and pathetic and all of that all at once. Pirates, by the way, in a stunning development, trailing 5-3 to the Dodgers this afternoon as we hit the airwaves here, or not airwaves, whatever. I think of them as airwaves.
Sure.
But yeah, and if you don't know what we're talking about, the beloved Pirates had a home run, rightfully taken away because did everything right except touch first base. The thing that my son, who is now in T-ball, we emphasize every time. Make sure you touch each base.
The Commonwealth
from
of
age
Pennsylvania,
5, most of these individuals are being taught, make sure you touch all of the bases from age 5, and yet they forget at the major league level. Now, in fairness, only in Pittsburgh do they forget this.
Well, I was just going to say the Keystone State in general has been having a rough time on the base paths. Did you see the other night? Yeah,
I did.
It's not too often you see the man on second get run down and tagged by the catcher.
This is true.
And yet, Pennsylvania having a tough time with the fundamentals of a sport. These guys are being paid many millions of dollars to play professionionally.
It is truly breathtaking how poorly the Pirates understand the fundamentals, though, and it is.
I still think, though, the oldie but goodie in that meme, which is Lloyd McClendon just picking up first base and walking off with it, that still might be my favorite.
Yes. I'm with you. That was.
There have been some great manager tirades in the history of the MLB, and Lloyd McClendon just taking the base and leaving with it has got to be right up near number one.
Yeah, that was a one-time thing for Lloyd. I still think, for me, at least in my lifetime, and I go back in terms of. Remembering and following kind of mid to late 70s, 75, 76, more so 77, 78, moving forward in terms of managerial tirades. Obviously, Billy Martin is still the king of my lifetime. No but I got to tell you, Earl Weaver is right up there. He had some beauties. Tommy Lasorda had some beauties. Most of if you're in the business long enough, you're going to have some good ones. But Earl Weaver, Billy Martin again, clearly the king. Earl Weaver was pretty good though. He got his money's worth a lot of the time. But yeah, Lloyd, first base and marching off was a pretty unique protestation. Lots to get into today. We'll touch on the Michigan stuff a little bit later. The great frustration for me, and I just happened to be flipping through. This was overnight. We've been having tough time making it through the night asleep in our house for a variety of reasons, puppy, kid, and
it's like 95 degrees
work related,
after the sun
yes,
goes down.
weather related, all of these things. So I'm a guy, so I flip through the TV. I can't watch if I have the remote. My wife likes to just stay on one channel, and that's where we reside for the entire evening. But if I get a hold of the remote, it's about every 2 minutes that we're just checking. I just want to see what else is on in case we're missing something better.
Sure.
And I was flipping through, and it was one of those. I don't know if it was VH1 or E Network or one of them, but they were doing the, remembering the years. And of course, the year that I'm flipping through and that they're doing is 2011. And of course, front and center is Jerry Sandusky. And I'm listening to the, I can't even get angry at the, because they're, people are weighing in, oh yeah, that guy in Penn State, they got off light with the, jail for the right. And I'm like, you know what? Because based on what you think and what was reported, I would be of the same mindset if I actually, which I did for a short period. I bought into the grand jury report and the whole bit because God is my witness. I didn't know you could just completely make crap up in a grand jury report.
Well, look, nobody even knew what a grand jury report was, frankly. And, look, to the point I've made on here probably half a dozen times, if it wasn't for you and Goon telling me off the air one day, to this day, I'd still believe Aaron Donald beat some guy up in a bar a couple months ago. Because you see this stuff and then it goes off your radar. And that's it.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, the what is it? Bo Schembechler's son now says that Bo Schembechler knew of the abuse of the doctor at Michigan at the time, and actively covered it up. How else would you state that, right? So that what you have alleged at Penn State, which did not occur, and again, more and more people, for all the good it does, that are taking the time, and part of the problem is it takes 5 minutes to form the opinion of when you're being told, hey, there was a pedophile and this and that. Well, my God, I'm against that, and you can be done with it. Or you can now spend the whatever it is. It must be 30 to 40 hours of podcast time that John Ziegler is spending, and it's well worth it if you're interested in the truth. But again, how many people are going to take the time? I am encouraged by the number of people, though, that are taking the time saying, holy crap. And pretty much anybody that John Ziegler has had the chance to talk to and be able to present, he's been on a bunch of radio shows, and some with hosts that are like, you're a whack job, Ziegler, but let's try to explain this. And then by the end of it, they're like, holy crap. Ziegler, you are absolutely right. This is this makes no sense, and it truly makes no sense when you just real quickly. And again, I don't want to spend the entire show on this. I don't want to spend more than about 5 minutes on it, but just from the get-go, it never made sense if you had any understanding of the relationship between Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky. If nothing else, there was zero reason for Joe Paterno to be covering up sex abuse from a former coach. Again, it would be one thing to say, listen, he was covering it up while he was coaching, but once Sandusky has retired, the explanation of Paterno wanting to cover this up to keep the football machine rolling, again, makes zero sense. If you are only interested in your football program, right, and you don't want anything to get out about Sandusky, you were at least telling him, get the hell off of our campus, because I don't want to, if this story ever breaks, have anything. Why would you continue to allow him? It makes zero sense. Nobody in their right mind would say, listen, yes, we want the abuse to continue and we want you to keep doing it on our campus where there's no advantage for us any longer because you no longer are helping our program. But by God, if you get caught, we'll be able to bring the football program down. I mean,
look, the whole conspiracy notion, the cover-up story is utter foolishness. There is not a single shred of documentary evidence to support it. And I think it is based on two things. It is based on the language of the grand jury presentment and the way it was reported in the first 3 days and how that anchored the way the public thought about the story and the media talked about it. Despite, chapter and verse, all the things that they sort of discredit the key line in the grand jury report. And then Louis Freeh's press conference, and as I do, chapter and verse, all the things that discredit the way Louis Freeh presented the contents of his own report. And so, to your point, long story short, what is being alleged here about Schembechler, and look, I mean, I have learned the hard way not to take anything I am presented in mass media for granted, and I have not had anywhere close to approaching the time to dig into it. And frankly, I don't know that I'm going to take the time to dig into it. But I'm not going to render any judgment other than to say that what is alleged here on the surface is 10 times more direct, explicit, and worse than what has been insinuated about Joe at any point over the years.
Yeah, and much worse, and in part because it is. Listen, any human being has a responsibility to defend other human beings, right, from abuse of any kind. But a university being asked to protect children who, again, might visit campus but are not part of their – that's not part of what the university's purview is, right? It's the professors and the students that are on the campus. And visitors, you don't want anything bad to happen. I'm not suggesting that you just, hey, our responsibility is only the professors and the students. But that is your first and foremost responsibility. That is your duty. And Michigan breached it here in the most horrendous of ways if these allegations are true. And again, we are having a lot more credible support of the allegations here at Michigan than has ever come about at Penn State or even with Jerry himself. And it's just, it is just frustrating because time and time again, from Michigan State to Ohio State to Michigan now, and it is somewhat ironic, right, that it's all Big Ten schools where these things are rocking, and Penn State is the only one that had the hammer laid down by the NCAA, where again the allegations are even less.
Larry Nassar came out and copped to what he was accused of,
which, by the way,
they haven't burnt that place to the ground.
Well, and the other thing about that. And we're already spending more time than I wanted to, and I apologize. But the thing about that, too, is if you do read, and I ended up reading more than I ever thought I would in my entire life on pedophiles, the overwhelming majority of pedophiles, once caught, do one of two things, or are in the process of being caught, do one of two things. What Nassar did, which is basically say, my God, forgive me, the Jimmy Swaggart, forgive my sins. I just couldn't help myself and all of that. Or they start calling the victims and say, listen, I'm really sorry, but can you help me out here? I never really intended for anything bad to happen, and try to cover the tracks. One of the telltale signs in the Sandusky case, again, for anybody that wants to pay attention, is he never has pleaded guilty to anything or admitted guilt to anything. And by the victim's own admissions, has never contacted, none of the victims has alleged, not one has alleged that Jerry even called him up and said, listen, I'd like you to at least... this is, my memory. Could you, help support in any way. All of them have said, the ones that have said Sandusky contacted them, all agree that Sandusky told them to just tell the truth, to say what happened. And there's only two that I'm aware of that Sandusky even contacted in any way. And Alan Myers being the most prominent, which is still my great hope, is that sometime Alan's conscience is going to get the better of him, and he's going to come out and spill the beans on at least the alleged shower incident that Mike McQuarrie walked in on. But anyways, but the hypocrisy here, when you look again at Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, I would argue, even with the allegations that have been made, that the absolute, if you allow that all of the allegations, and we clearly don't in Penn State's case, but you allow all of the allegations in all of these schools are accurate and true, I would still argue that Penn State would be the fourth on the list of egregious acts. And again, all four very egregious with the allegations. But what happened here and what was continued to be allowed to happen at the other three schools
and tone
is
of
just
the coverage and punishment is inversely proportional.
And it just makes zero sense.
Yeah. And look, and my last word on that is I've had some good Twitter interactions with people today about this, and I really appreciate all the thoughtful comments people have from the Penn State community on all of this. My view is I get it. Every time you see something like this, there's a part of you that wants to say, well, where is the lynch mob for this school, for this coach, whatever? I get it. My advice is do not let yourself get caught up in that.
Agreed.
Because it'll eat you from the inside out, man. I really believe that. Like, yeah, it chaps my ass just like it does yours. Don't get me wrong. But on the other hand, like, man, life's rough and it is unfair and every day is a blessing. And I tend to wake up every morning and think about where are the positive things I can focus on. And you know what? Penn State is still here. Penn State football is still here. State College is still here. This is still Happy Valley. And if nothing else, all of us in the Penn State community, we've had an opportunity to learn the lesson of how tough we are to get back up off the mat after getting hit with a flurry of haymakers. And so I can't go back in time and change anything that has already happened, and neither can anyone. And so I tend to take the positive from it. And from that extent, I do not want to look back at any other place and any other community and group of fans and alumni who have had the misfortune of having something like this darken their doorstep and say, oh, well, I wish something comparatively bad would be visited on them. That's not the way I'm going to live my life.
No,
and I would encourage everybody else to do the same. It's better for your soul. I really believe it.
No, I'm with you, and I do think it's clearly hypocritical. There are clearly issues that should be addressed that I suspect will not. But it is one of the things, and not to get tired in the cliches here, but one of the things that sports teaches you, right, is that life is unfair, right? There are horrible calls made all of the time that benefit or hinder individuals, teams. I mean, the number of Olympic calls that have really changed the direction of lives, good and bad. And some of this stuff was later basically proven to be, it was just pure politics and had nothing to do with what was happening. That's horrendously unfair. But what Jeff Brown posted. Yeah, Jeff Brown posted something on his Facebook. There was I forget. I think it was American Idol or one of those types of shows has a contestant who is I think being treated for cancer now, and the patient, I guess, told the judges, listen, if you're gonna or you can't wait until life isn't hard to be happy, right? Like that's because. And it's a choice that we all make. And to your point, again, horrendously unfair. Again, the people that take the time to, okay, what are you saying here about what happened? And again, if you take the time to peel back the onion, it is, as John Ziegler says, it is actually pretty clear. I mean, it's not even like it's close. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty obvious that Jerry Sandusky was not a pedophile, and certainly, at the very least, that there was no attempted cover-up of any kind to cover pedophilia with anybody here at Penn State. And again, one of the many great ironies in this is that you had, impeccable reputations for Gary Schultz and Tim Curley, and people had problems with Graham Spanier, but it wasn't character issues. And Mike McQuarrie, again, I have nothing against Mike McQuarrie, really, but this is a guy who, while married, was sending, dick pics to college co-eds. This is a guy who was against the rules, betting on college athletics while in college. I mean, there were some pretty significant character issues here, and yet, in the free report, and anybody that believes that there was a conspiracy here at Penn State, you have to believe that the reputations earned over decades of Tim Curley and Gary Schultz in particular were fraudulent, and that this character-challenged individual was clearly, utterly, completely telling the truth. And again, to me, one of the many things that doesn't make any sense to me in that particular case.
Probably worth noting, since we're talking about this, that Graham Spanier reported to prison yesterday. And listen, Ironhead, I am not going to be confused with an officer of the Graham Spanier fan club. Okay?
Nor am I.
I wouldn't even be the secretary or the treasurer of that club. I would not be a member. Nevertheless, just because you have quarrels with someone, and just because you believe they may have done some things that you don't like or even were bad, it's a really terrible precedent to set that you then look the other way if they're like incarcerated for something you don't think they deserve to be sent to prison for. And when you look at what he was actually convicted of, first of all, the entire
sending him to prison
case is legally tenuous. But the notion that you would send a 70-plus-year-old man with advanced stage cancer during COVID to prison on a misdemeanor that at least one court has said it wasn't even legal to charge him with in the first place that's very disturbing to me. Extremely disturbing. Yeah. And again, I am not someone who's going to lay out in traffic defending Graham Spanier, although I do think he has one of the most fascinating legacies, Sandusky scandal aside, of any president in Penn State history. Nevertheless, it is just appalling to me. It is an appalling failure of the legal system that man, with the conditions I just laid out, is now going to spend time in a jail cell. It's nuts. The whole thing is just absolute insanity to me.
It truly is.
Mind-boggling.
And just very frustrating. I guess we'll leave it there. The frustration continues. Again, for anybody that wants to take the time to actually look into it and pay attention. And quite frankly, I can't really blame anybody who says, listen, I got my own life to lead here. I can't afford to get bogged down in it again. The history for me is in part, I'm not sure I'd be as passionate about it as if I wasn't childhood friends with the kids in that family. And again, when the initial story broke, I mean, it shook. I think somewhere there's, if anybody recorded it, there's audio of me saying that, I feel like my childhood has been ripped away to a certain extent. And then, slowly I started to, because it just made no sense to me. I mean, we saw no, as I said at the time, even there was nothing there, even looking back, where I'm like, oh man, I missed the signs. Like there were no signs. Again, I guess you could say touchy feely. I mean, certainly, Jerry was, not somebody who was afraid to share a hug. But again, I have. I think I shared this story. It's one of the things I really worry about with our society moving forward, even before COVID, and now maybe even more so after. But we had a family friend, off topic but related, and then we'll move on. We had a family friend who was a kindergarten teacher, not in Pennsylvania, but not around here, down toward the Harrisburg area, Hershey area, and was a kindergarten teacher for 30 years. And this is going back to the 90s when she was given an edict. Well, I mean, all of the teachers were told, hey, you can't have any physical contact moving forward with kids anywhere in the school district. And she wrote to the superintendent or the principal, I'm forgetting which, and said, I just want to clarify here because I teach kindergarten, and when my kids do well, I give them a hug. That's what I do. And they're like, yeah, no, that is not going to be tolerated moving forward. And she said, well, I mean, I've been teaching for 30 years and there's been 0 incidents, and it's instinctive at this point. I'm not going to be able to not give a child a hug when they do well. This is now who I am. It's truly just an instinctive reaction. And they said, well, I mean, if you do that, you'll be reprimanded the first time, the second time, whatever. And then, and she said,
risk management, Ironhead, mitigate liability.
And she said, well, then God bless you, I'm retiring. And she did. She had planned to teach another 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And she's like, but I know, and I don't want to have my record, it was an impeccable record up to that point. She said, I don't want to have it, squandered over something that is, in her mind, absolutely ludicrous. Again, it's the again, that's going back, and it's only gotten more so since. And I don't know. I do think it's part of why we have some of the discipline and other issues that we have throughout societies is we're not allowing either end, the discipline or the love to be shown, right? Yeah. I mean, both are important. And I'm not saying you have to paddle the kids. I don't want to get down that street, but there needs to be rewards and age appropriate and all of that. But there need to be rewards for doing well, doing the right thing, and consequences for doing the wrong thing. And more we're just not allowing either, I think, to be shown. And I think it's a real problem. All right. Well, hey, that's what we do. We get off onto tangents.
My last word on this Ironhead is not for nothing. Bo Schembechler had a terrible bowl record and actively opposed Penn State's entrance into the Big Ten.
Big time.
Just throwing those out there, and that is a matter of public record.
Yes.
So there is no ambiguity to either one of those facts.
Take a break here. When we come back, I do want to talk some college football playoffs. I'm in favor of going to 16 teams, but it's looking like there's
16.
I would be in favor of that.
The State College Spikes return home Thursday night for a 6:35 p.m. matchup against the Williamsport Crosscutters. It's the return of a fan favorite, Thirsty Thursday. Fans 21 and up can quench their thirst with $2 16-ounce select drafts and $3 16-ounce craft drafts from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's Thirsty Thursday against the Crosscutters at 6:35. For tickets, call 814-272-1711 or buy and download at statecollegespikes.com.
Lion Country Kia is offering exceptional deals on your new Kia during Kia's Command the Season event.
We have a nice selection on the 2021 Kia Sportage with various options and prices as low as $26,800, saving you $3,000. Or if you demand big power and towing capacity, slip into one of the 2021 Kia Sorrentos available on our lot, starting at $32,680.
Discover why Kia drivers throughout the area come to Lion Country Kia or visit online at lioncountrykia.com.
Quaker Steak and Lube is throwing open the garage doors and setting up the umbrellas. It's patio season. Come enjoy great food, drinks, and fun in the sun. There's always something happening at Quaker Steak and Lube, but we're really amping up our event calendars for our favorite time of year. Visit thelube.com to find out what's happening at your local lube this season. Lunch, happy hour, dinner, or late night, indoors or outside, at Quaker Steak and Lube, you'll always find big flavors, friendly faces, and lots of fun.
Hi, Johnny Broom here. If you're in the market for a new Hyundai or a pre-owned car, truck, van, or SUV, nobody beats a Blaze Alexander deal. But don't take my word for it.
Hey, Goon says tell him Johnny sent you.
Hey, tell him Johnny sent ya.
Tell him Johnny sent you.
Wait, tell him Juan or tell him Johnny sent you?
Tell him Johnny sent you.
Here at Bill Pickles Tap Room, we say,
Tell them Johnny sent you.
and remember,
Hey, we're back.
We welcome you back. Little technical difficulty
Power
there.
blip there.
It happens. What are you going to do? Be happy anyway. Life isn't going to be easy.
That was the man upstairs telling us to keep it moving along.
Yes, indeed. And
Stunned at that 16 teams, Ironhead. That is quite a claim. All right, so let's get into it.
Well,
College football playoff reform.
Yeah.
Hit me up.
So here's my thinking. And listen, I don't like the argument, and just me. I don't like the argument of the wonderful thing about college football is that every game is meaningful, because it's not. And I would argue, listen, in college basketball, right at the beginning of the season, you have all of those tournaments all over the place where you get those marquee matchups.
Yeah.
How many of those, and I understand we're getting ready for Penn State Auburn this fall. Those are now the exceptions, not the rules. It used to be, right? I mean, college football, and maybe a little skewed as because following Penn State in the 80s where you were getting Penn State, Nebraska, Penn State and Alabama, Penn State and Notre Dame. But listen, you also, you were getting, I think, more of those marquee matchups between different conferences and different sections of the country. The way it is set up now with the 4-team playoff is everybody is looking at it. Really now it's just about trying to get, if you're one of the Power 5 conferences, it is just about trying to get the payday, truthfully, number one, and a very close number two is getting an undefeated out-of-conference record. And it really doesn't matter who you're beating. You can line up 3 cupcakes, and if you win the Big Ten, you're going to be in the playoffs. People will complain and will point out, hey, I mean, it was 3 cupcakes that they beat, but they're going to turn around and say, well, yeah, but they're undefeated, and they went through, my God, the meat grinder that is the Big Ten, or the meat grinder that is the SEC, or even the non-meat grinder of the Big 12 or the ACC or the Pac-12.
Ironhead, I got a few dead horses that I just love to beat mercilessly into a pulp.
Yes, sir.
And one that you would have to go to the dental records or the horseshoe records or whatever they use for a horse to identify is in 2016, the University of Washington scheduled the most embarrassing non-conference schedule I have seen for a Power 5 team.
Yes.
They played PSU in the non-conference schedule.
Yes.
Ironhead. Portland State University,
Yes.
of course. Portland State in football. Most people don't even know Portland State is a thing. The University of Washington played
I think
them
half
in football.
the people that go to Portland State didn't know they had a football program.
They played non-Big Ten Rutgers, which is like worse than scheduling a group of 5 school from a lot of these conferences. And then some other joker, like DeVry Academy or something, was their third game. Like an insanely terrible non-conference schedule. But you know what? God bless them. They ran the table.
Yep.
And they ended up, people always focused on the fact that in 2016, Penn State beat Ohio State and won the Big Ten, and Ohio State got a playoff berth and Penn State didn't. Well, I always felt like the Buckeyes, by virtue of their body of work, belonged in the playoffs, and so did Penn State.
Yep.
And the team I have always viewed as knocking us out of the group of 4 was not Ohio State, it was Washington. And I was like, that is the committee essentially sending the signal that makes your point. Whatever you do not eat a loss in your non-conference schedule. And if that means that you put 3 jokers on your out-of-conference slate, you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Because Washington had 1 loss as well, just to refresh everybody's memory. Penn State had 2 losses, the blowout loss at Michigan when we were down to like our 9th string linebacker, and the loss to Pitt early on. And there was nobody remotely approaching the quality of Pitt as an opponent on Washington's schedule.
And that Pitt game,
game was on the road.
Yeah, and that Pitt game just haunts you because it was, my opinion here, my opinion only, but that was a game where Penn State just did not understand it. And really, it was James Franklin, I think. And I love James Franklin overall. I'm not – I just don't think he understood how significant that rivalry was. And I think you saw it, right? I mean, the second half to me, and I get if you're a Pitt fan, you can say, listen, Pitt was eased up and, it was hard to keep it on the gas. And so, I mean, you can have different perspectives on this, and I acknowledge that. I truly believe Penn State was just a far superior team that year, but the energy and the emotion that Pitt had, and I think that's what Penn State just did not understand the buzzsaw it was walking into in that first half.
And they
I think they understood it.
They were on the road. They made a bunch of uncharacteristic
there were a
mistakes.
bunch.
Saquon Barkley fumbled in that game. That guy never fumbled.
So, and they made the adjustments at halftime and obviously outplayed them, just not quite enough in the second half. But if Penn State wins that game, to your point, I think Penn State is in the college football playoffs, and I don't think there's even that much debate about it. But going back to the where the numbers should be, here's my take: is I like the idea, and I think we've talked about this before, at least Goon and I. And again, just my take. One of the things I like about the NCAA basketball tournament, one of the many things I like, is that every team that plays Division I has the dream at the start of the season, and it is an attainable dream to at least be in the NCAA tournament, 1. And number 2, listen, you can catch, fire and have crazy things happen, and we've seen not very often. State. But we have seen, George Mason making. I mean, you have seen Loyola of Chicago. You've seen teams that seemingly came from nowhere to make at least significant noise, if not win a national title. But more important than that, to me, is again just having. You ought to. Like every team at the beginning of the NFL season has a chance to go win the Super Bowl, right? It's up to you and how you play, but there's no team that's excluded. If you're not a Power 5 conference school, you are virtually excluded from the process.
For sure.
And you are completely excluded if you are like a Mid-American Conference school. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and make the argument that there has ever been a season in which there was a Mid-American Conference school that was the best team and would have had the if it had the opportunity, would have gone out and won the national title.
2000 Toledo.
No. I'm not making that argument. Rockets. But I do think if you're all going to be playing in the same division, level or division, then you ought to at least have that opportunity. If you get to 16 teams, you can take the 11 conference champions. I think it's 11 conferences now. I might be wrong on that. If I am, you can correct me. I think it's 11. And then still have the 5, quote unquote, legit teams that can be a threat to the conference, the Power 5 conference champions. And I think rather than making, I think if you truly factor in the strength of schedule, and one of the things that I think should change in college football, and I've always thought this going back to when I was a kid, and Joe Paterno used to talk about it. You would try to schedule. Football schedules are always made way in advance, right?
Sure.
And now you will have schools that will, drop off of the schedule, and you sometimes within a year you're making, okay, well, instead of this game, we're going to replace it with this. I mean, Penn State had that with Auburn, had it with Virginia Tech. That stuff does happen. But generally speaking, you're trying to fill out your schedule 5 to 10 years in advance. In no other sport at the collegiate level, they're not doing that in basketball.
You're right.
That they're doing it well, why can't you do that in football? And the argument has always been, well, it's a nonsensical argument, because what happens is, right, you might be trying to schedule scheduling Florida State. You are trying to presumably schedule a really good opponent.
Sure.
If you're scheduling, let's just take Alabama, and I'm not expecting Alabama to go anywhere, but if Nick Saban retires or something happens and he's going, there's no guarantee that 10 years from now, Alabama's going to be even a good game. Right? Expectations,
you're
right?
Saying, when Boston College might be the powerhouse in 2039 or whatever it is.
But listen, we've seen this happen both ways, right? Where schools try to schedule a cupcake, right? If you scheduled Cincinnati 10 years from 20, what was the year they had they've become a good football program. But there were years back in the 80s when Cincinnati was laughable. Nobody would lose to Cincinnati. But generally speaking, right?
Said you were trying to schedule that Toledo back in 2000.
You were trying to schedule that as a cupcake.
Yeah.
But again, you cannot project accurately 8-10 years. And again, it can work the other way where you try to, well, and it can work the other way where you're trying to schedule a cupcake, and then all of a sudden, the hot coach comes to that school and, whoa, wait a second.
State.
We thought this was going to be, for example. One thing I would advocate is, no, let's just go schedule the games, right after the previous season ends. You have a month there, and everybody's got to get together and figure it out.
Look, coronavirus put the lie to a lot of things we assumed were one way, and then we found out they could be another way.
Yep.
And I feel like the veil got lifted on that whole we've got to schedule non-conference games 10 years out.
Yeah.
When BYU and Coastal Carolina put together a game in 4 days.
Well,
right?
Again, you do it in every other sport.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me, and I get that there is a lot involved. You cannot tell me that for 3 games, you can't, and in some cases, we're talking about 1 road game. You can't get the logistics figured out in 8 months.
Yeah.
I'm not buying it. With people at these schools who that's what they do. Is the logistics of travel for basketball and wrestling and baseball and softball. But we can't figure it out for football.
We could just hire another associate AD just
for all of those sports, right? How many games are you figuring it out? And basketball, you're going all over the place. You're going to, in some cases, other countries. But we can't do it in football for a game or 2. What?
Very good
I
point.
mean,
very good point.
So that takes away that, and then I do think you have to, the strength of schedule has to be a bigger player than what it is now. I know they say it is now. It's not. The non-conference, at least. Again, yes, the strength of schedule comes into play with the conference, and I think the SEC and the Big Ten generally have very good teams, very good coaches, top to bottom, for the most part, throughout those conferences. But again, in basketball, yes, not every game is the magnitude that college football is, but that is in part because you're dealing with a 30-game-ish schedule versus a 12-game schedule. So that's one. But also, like, you are not, if you're a college basketball fan or even a casual sports fan, you are not at the start of the season going to, well, I'm not going to watch this Duke versus Michigan game because it's meaningless, and this has nothing to do with the end of this. No, you're going to tune in because, like you do with any sport, if you're a fan of it, right? I mean, I tune in. I'll watch an Iowa-Oklahoma State meet, even though in the overall scheme, that meet has very little of anything to do with who wins the national title at the end of the season. But I want to see how those two teams match up whenever and wherever they wrestle. You get two great baseball teams. I want to watch it. Two great basketball teams, two great football teams. So I don't buy that every game is important. Too many of these games aren't important. That's the whole point is, yeah, you can't stumble against a team that you're a 49-point favorite against. But rather than watch that game, I would argue the sport would benefit from having a couple of Penn State Auburn type matchups early in the season. And yes, allow the loser of that to still be right in the thick of the playoff race if they go on and win the rest of their games. Or even if you lose a Big Ten game, even having two losses, if all of the big dogs are playing, again, a couple of competitive matchups, on paper, competitive matchups in the non-conference schedule, then I think it adds to the intrigue for the postseason. So I just and again, I think you can get to 16 teams and have 12 as the max regular season schedule you can have, and allow teams to do 11 or 12. All the Power 5 conferences are going to do the 12 if that's what's allowed. But it's 4 extra games, and 16 is a lot. I will give you that, but we have had teams playing 15 games as it is.
The
whole
whole
about
number
2
of
teams are going to play
thing,
16. I think I can live with that. So I would just soon see the 16. It does seem like there's momentum building toward 12.
Yeah, so if you're on board for 16, then I'm guessing there's no pushback on 12 whatsoever.
Not for me.
Okay. So look, my co-host Kevin Horn, I think, makes the most level-headed, articulate argument for why we should stay at 4 in terms of preserving the uniqueness and integrity of the regular season. And I think there are valid points on both sides, but
as do I. I mean,
I think it's tough to argue for 4 right now, and he argues for 4 about as well as I've heard anybody do it. So I respect that viewpoint. The one thing I always try to think about in all of this, especially as we're into this whole conversation about name, image, and likeness and direct payments to players, and we're talking about upending the financial model of how the money flows through college sports. All of those arguments only mean anything as long as people want to consume the product of college football. So you do have to think about, hey, we are marketing an entertainment product here that is up against not just other pro sports and other college sports, but against every other distraction, movies and video games and everything, hiking and biking. You've got to get enough people to want to take time out of their day to put their eyeballs on the product of college football for it to be worth the money that then allows you to do whatever you do with it, right?
Yes.
And so if you look at all the other pro sports, and I think baseball is the closest analogy to where we are with college football in terms of you have a longish regular season where traditionally very few participants have made it to the postseason. And you go all the way back to when the wild card, division title winners and wild card games were added to baseball. And the purists said, oh, it's going to detract from the regular season. It's going to make the postseason less special. Look, I mean, arguably you could say they were right, but the turnaround was an increase in value of the overall entertainment product because you had more fans invested for a longer period of time. So more fans were engaged over the course of the regular season. And as every year started, you had more fan bases that could start the year saying like, hey, I think my team has a chance to make some noise this year. I mean, the NFL is the master of that.
No doubt.
They've engineered the whole thing to more or less
keep hope alive for everybody.
Move towards parity for everybody, but like the Lions and the Browns. And hell, even the Browns have finally crawled out of the muck. And the NFL's adding playoff teams. Are they diluting the value of the regular season? Like maybe. But look, come week 10, 12, week 14, the more cities and the more fan bases you have still believing their team has a chance, the more people you've got tuning into your games because they care, right? So you've got to balance the value of the entertainment product versus its uniqueness, right? Like you've got to think about the business model here.
Yep.
And so I think while 4 probably does preserve both the uniqueness of each regular season game having a lot of weight on it. And look, I'm not sure that if you went to 8 teams or 12 or to 16, the legitimate number of legitimate title contenders would change all that much. Most of the time, you've got 2 teams with a shot at the title, and it's not going to change by increasing the number of playoff participants, but you're going to keep more fan bases engaged. And you're also maybe going to get rid of this downstream, I think, very corrosive impact on the sport of all the Georgias and Penn States and Texases of the world, that if you don't make the playoffs, the fans don't care.
Yeah.
You see the economic impact on travel companies, bowl games, apparel sales, any of the businesses that have built up around the enterprise of college sports. They're all taking a hit right now because Penn State can win 10 games, go to a New Year's Six bowl, and if they miss a playoff game, there's a not insignificant portion of the fan base that feels like the season was a letdown or a failure. And so I think kind of, loosening those strictures probably in the long term, making your product a saleable product advises the expansion of the playoffs. So I think whether it's 4 or 12 or whatever it is, opening things up is going to be a business necessity, whether the purist argument is correct or not. And I think it makes some valid points. So 12, explain this to me now, though.
Yeah.
If you've got 12 participants, you've got to have 2 teams with a double bye and then 2 teams with a 1 bye. Is that how it's going to work?
I would think. Well, I mean, there's. I don't know. I don't know what the setup would be there. If you could do it as just the top. What would it be? Now I'm going to get my numbers confused. Math. Doing math live is never a good thing for me. But if you have. You could just have the top 4 seeds, right?
Yeah.
Have the first round bye, and then just have the first round be 5, 12,
sure.
4, and set up that way.
That might be what they do.
Where the issue with that at the moment is still, again, you still have the 5 Power 5 conference schools, so you're still now less of an argument because at least all 5 conference champions clearly are going to be in at that point for the Power 5.
So
schools.
what they're suggesting is it'll be the 6 highest ranked conference champions. So theoretically, your top 5 will be your Power 5 champs. Although
plus one, right?
The Pac-12 a little bit iffy there. You know,
there could be a year, maybe even 2, where yes, but
that, at least you get one group of 5 conference champion in there, and again, maybe 2, and then 6 at large.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I could live with that. Again, I want there to be at least the opportunity for every team to have that the carrot at least officially dangled, that you can get at least to the playoffs. And then again, once you get to the playoffs, in theory, anything can happen. I mean, you could have, Alabama commit 10 turnovers and theoretically at least almost lose to a MAC school, maybe 12 turnovers, and it could actually lose. But again, it's to me, it's about, a couple of things: keeping the fan bases engaged and enthused, creating more opportunities for games of interest early in the season. And again, part of that has to be that, it is the strength of schedule is actually a significant factor here. And again, part of that to me, because I don't like that the current system, at least in theory, penalizes teams for playing somebody that unexpectedly goes 6-6, that perennially goes 10-2.
Good point.
Why are you penalizing? I mean, it's not my fault that team didn't live up to its normal standard. I mean, how can you cannot control what another team does, but I think at least and maybe even get to the point where not the NCAA. I almost said the NCAA. You can't. That can't be the group that does it. But you have somebody other than the school say, listen, this is the non-conference schedule this season. Here's the games. I mean, the conferences dictate what your conference schedule is now. It's not like Penn State and Iowa get together and say, hey, we'd like to do. No, the Big Ten tells you this is the order, and that
would be fun.
Where you're playing.
Think of the conspiracy theories our fans would cook up about who Penn State ends up getting scheduled. I would love it.
That is true. But maybe it's even you just rotate through. Listen, this year, like you do with the NFL. This year it's the Big 10, Big 12 crossover games.
Sure.
And the SEC has the Pac-12, and again, there's still going to be, no matter what you do, there's always going to be, because just what I said. I mean, you can have a year. Penn State was projected top 10 last year, right? But they get off to an 0-5 start. Well, if you're one of the teams that had Penn State on the schedule, right, you're expecting that to be a marquee win.
The example that hits home on that for me is I think you remember back in 08, 09, we had that home and home with Syracuse.
Yeah.
They're total jokers by the time we played them. But when that was scheduled, Donovan McNabb had just won the Orange Bowl.
Yes.
Like, that looked like it was going to be a great rekindling of a historic rivalry against a team that was bouncing back. And as soon as McNabb graduated, they went off the edge of a cliff.
Well, and again, there are so many things that can happen, right? Just in a 4-year period, whether, sanctions, NCAA sanctions, new coach. I mean, all kinds of things can affect. And even disregarding all of that, right? I mean, every season there is at least a couple of teams that perform much better than anybody's anticipating, and a couple of teams that perform much worse than anybody's expecting. And that's just on, from preseason to the end of the year, without any, same coach. I mean, everything that everybody assumes. And I always use the example the 79 Penn State team, because they had virtually everybody back from that Sugar Bowl team that lost a questionable heartbreaker to Alabama, and everybody was projecting that team was going to be, at least among the contenders, if not the team to beat. And, it struggled to a 4-loss season. And, that was all kinds of reasons that went into the disappointment of that year. But, again, you never know when a team, for whatever reason, is going to have a better or worse than anticipated season. But at least you can try to, from one year to the next, you have a pretty good idea. Like, pretty sure Alabama and Clemson are going to be pretty good next year. Pretty sure Ohio State's going to be pretty good next year. Pretty sure while Rutgers and Maryland might be improved, they're not going to be among the teams competing for a national title in 2021. You have, a good number of teams that at least have a pretty good feeling about generally where they're going to finish in the upcoming season. But again, there's always a team or two that you're thinking is going to stink, that absolutely catches fire, and a team or two that everybody presumes will be a top 10 squad that just falls way short of that. So, and I think expanding 12, I think is good. I'm okay even with 6 or 8, but 12 to me gets you to a point where, again, you have, to your point, a lot of fan bases now engaged, lobbying for for the non-Power 5 conferences. Hey, look at our conference. Games. Yeah, all kinds of I think really neat opportunities open up, and I don't think. I don't think there's anybody, I don't think one set of eyeballs is not going to tune in to an early season game because, this game doesn't mean as much now that there's 12 teams. It meant a lot more when there were 4 teams in the playoffs. I don't think there's a single game that's going to draw fewer viewers because of that fact. I don't think there's a single game.
Very good point.
And again, I think there's a chance that you create more games. If it's done right, I think you have the opportunity to force the creation of more intriguing matchups, which, again, even if it's, a loss doesn't eliminate you from the playoffs. Yeah, but dude, it's Penn State Auburn and a whiteout. I'm tuning in whether or not that game eliminates anybody from the playoffs or not, because I want to see how Penn State and Auburn do under the lights at Beaver Stadium. I want to see, an Oklahoma against an Alabama early in the season. I don't care if we see them. In fact, it'd make it more fun if we do see them both again in the playoffs at the end of the year. I think that opportunity is I think it would be important for football, actually. I think instead of making those games less important, it has a chance to make them more important. And, home field advantage and all of the other things, the seating, it all comes into play, as it does with, every other sport in college athletics. Right, has certainly more than a 4-team playoff, and none of those sports does anybody say, I'm not watching those early season games between the highly ranked teams because it's meaningless or not as meaningful as football. That's not happening.
And it's not like the NFL adding yet another wild card team. If you look at the professional sports leagues, and I understand it's a little bit of a different deal.
Yeah.
But again, just thinking about fan engagement, entertainment product. About 50% of the league's teams make their postseason now in every sport. Yeah. If you go to 12 teams in college football, it's still only 9% of the eligible teams.
Pretty unique in the overall scope of percentage of teams that are making the playoffs. That's going to wrap up today's show. Again, Goon is back on Tuesday. I am out next week, so I will be back a week from Tuesday, all tanned, presumably, and rested.
And relaxed. That's the expectation.
And ready to go. No Pirates baseball watching for me. A stress-free trip to Holden Beach coming up. Folks, Goon and Chris will talk to you next Tuesday. Until then, be good and be safe.